The dust from the street settled on Quincy Carson's boots as he stood frozen in the doorway of Mueller's Mercantile, watching a young woman sob quietly into her threadbare handkerchief, while the shopkeeper shook his head with practiced indifference. It was late September in 1882, and Springerville, Arizona Territory had been suffering through a drought that left most folks stretched thin. But something about the way her shoulders shook told Quincy this woman's troubles ran deeper than lack of rain. "I am sorry, miss, but I cannot extend any more credit," old Mueller said, not unkindly but firmly. "You already owe $14 from last month." The woman's voice came out trembling. "Please, sir. My father passed 3 weeks ago, and I have been trying to manage the homestead on my own. But the well went dry, and I need just a few supplies to get me through until I can sell some of his tools. I promise I will pay you back." Mueller sighed, wiping his hands on his apron. "Your father was a good man, Miss Kelley, but business is business. I've got my own family to feed." Quincy watched as the woman, who could not have been more than 22 or 23, carefully folded the list she had been holding. Her calico dress, though clean, had been mended multiple times, and her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a simple bun that had come partially loose. Even in her distress, there was something striking about her, something that made Quincy's heart constrict in a way it had not done in his 31 years. He stepped forward before he could think better of it. "Excuse me, madam." She turned, her green eyes red-rimmed and startled. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the way her cheekbones stood out too sharply, suggesting she had been skipping meals. Quincy removed his hat, suddenly aware of how rough he must look after 3 days on the range. "I apologize for intruding on your private business," Quincy said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "But I could not help overhearing. Would you allow me to cover your supplies today?" The woman's face flushed red. "I cannot accept charity from a stranger, sir." "It would not be charity," Quincy said quickly, his mind racing for something that would allow her to keep her dignity. "I have a proposition for you if you would hear me out." She studied him warily, clutching her reticule close. Mueller watched the exchange with interest, leaning against his counter. "I have a ranch about 5 miles west of here," Quincy continued. 300 acres, decent house, good water from a spring-fed creek. I run about 200 head of cattle and breed horses. It is a good spread, profitable even in lean years." He paused, aware he was rambling. "What I am trying to say is, I have been alone out there for near about 8 years now, since my parents passed from fever. I could use a wife, and from what you just said, it sounds like you could use a home and security. So I am asking you, Miss Kelley, if you would consider marrying me." The silence that followed felt like it stretched for an eternity. Mueller's jaw had dropped open, and the young woman stared at Quincy as if he had sprouted a second head. "You want to marry me," she finally managed. "You do not even know my Christian name." "That is true enough," Quincy admitted, "but I know you loved your father enough to cry over his passing. I know you are trying to honor his memory by keeping his homestead going. I know you have pride enough not to want charity, and I respect that. Those things tell me more about your character than a dozen Sunday socials ever could." "This is insane," she whispered, but Quincy noticed she had not immediately refused. "Probably," he agreed. "But we are in hard country, Miss Kelley, and sometimes practical considerations outweigh romantic notions. I am offering you a home, security, and respect. I would not expect anything from you that you were not willing to give. We could start as partners and see where things lead from there." She looked down at her worn shoes, then at the list in her hands, then back at Quincy. He could see her mind working, weighing options that likely all seemed equally impossible. "My name is Thea," she said quietly. Thea Kelley. I am 22 years old. My mother died when I was young, and it has been just my father and me for most of my life. He taught me to read and write and do figures. I can cook and sew, tend a garden, and help with animals if needed. I do not have much in the way of a dowry, just my father's tools and his old wagon. That is more than enough, Quincy said. I am Quincy Carson. I am 31. I do not drink to excess. I do not gamble, and I do not raise my hand to women or animals. I cannot promise you romance, but I can promise you honesty and respect. Thea took a shaky breath. If I say yes, when would you expect us to marry? As soon as you are comfortable with it. Today, tomorrow, next week. Whatever suits you. She closed her eyes for a long moment, and Quincy could see her lips moving in what might have been a prayer. When she opened them again, there was a strange mixture of terror and relief in her gaze. All right, she said. Yes. I will marry you, Quincy Carson. Mueller let out a low whistle. Well, I will be damned. Pardon my language, Miss Kelley, but in all my years running this store, I have never seen anything quite like that. Quincy felt a surge of something he could not quite name. It was not love, not yet, but it was a sense of rightness, as if some piece of his life that had been missing had suddenly clicked into place. Mueller, I need you to fill Miss Kelley's order, plus add anything else she might need for the next month, and put it all on my account. The shopkeeper nodded, suddenly all business. Right away, Mr. Carson, and might I be the first to offer congratulations to you both. Thea still looked dazed. This is really happening, she murmured. I woke up this morning wondering how I would survive another week, and now I am engaged to be married. I know it is sudden, Quincy said gently. If you need time to think it over, no, Thea interrupted. No, if I think too hard about this, I will lose my nerve. You have made me a fair offer, and I accept it, but I have one condition. Name it. I want us to be married by a proper preacher, with legal papers filed at the courthouse. I have heard stories of frontier marriages that were not worth the paper they were written on. If I am going to do this, I want it done right. Agreed, Quincy said immediately. Reverend Michaels is in town this week, staying at the boarding house. We could speak to him today if you like, and we will get the marriage license from the territorial clerk tomorrow morning. Thea nodded slowly. Then I suppose we should do this properly. May I have a few days to settle my father's affairs and pack my belongings? Of course. Take whatever time you need. Where is your father's homestead? I will come help you with the heavy work. 3 miles east, near the base of the foothills. The old Brennan place, though we have lived there for 5 years now. Her voice caught slightly. He loved that land even though it fought him every step of the way. I know the place, Quincy said. Good soil when there is water. Your father was right to love it. Mueller began loading supplies into wooden crates. Flour, sugar, coffee, beans, salt pork, dried apples, and various other staples. He added a bolt of blue calico fabric and some white lace trim without being asked, and Quincy noticed Thea's eyes widen at the sight. Mr. Mueller, I only need basics, she protested. Every bride needs a new dress, the shopkeeper said firmly. And that blue will bring out your eyes nicely. Consider it a wedding gift. Thea's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they seemed to be from gratitude rather than despair. Thank you, she whispered. You are very kind. As Mueller finished loading the supplies, Quincy found himself studying his unexpected fiancée more closely. She was pretty in an understated way, with delicate features and an air of quiet strength that appealed to him. Her hands showed signs of hard work, but they were graceful nonetheless. He tried to imagine those hands in his kitchen, across the dinner table from him, and found the image surprisingly comfortable. The supplies are loaded, Mueller announced. That comes to $23.50, Mr. Carson. Quincy counted out the money from his billfold without hesitation. It was a significant sum, but he had done well with his horse sales this year and could afford it. "Where should I deliver these?" Mueller asked. "The old Brennan place or your ranch, Mr. Carson." "The Brennan place for now," Thea said. "I will need them while I am packing." "Actually," Quincy said, "would it make sense to take most of it straight to the ranch? You could keep what you need for the next few days and I will take the rest home, save you having to move it all later." Thea considered this. "That is practical. Yes, all right." They spent the next few minutes sorting through the supplies, with Thea selecting what she would need for the immediate future. Quincy found himself paying attention to her choices, noting that she was frugal but not foolishly so. She took enough to eat properly but did not waste anything. "I should head to the boarding house to speak with Reverend Michaels," Quincy said once they had finished. "Would you like to come with me, or would you prefer to return home and rest? I could call on you tomorrow morning to discuss the details." Thea straightened her shoulders, and Quincy caught a glimpse of the steel beneath her fragile appearance. "I will come with you. This concerns both of us, and I should be part of the conversation." They left Mueller's store together, Quincy carrying the smaller crate of supplies while Mueller promised to hold the rest until Quincy could return with his wagon. The afternoon sun was intense, and Quincy noticed Thea squinting against the glare. Her bonnet had seen better days, and he made a mental note to ensure she got a new one. Springerville's Main Street was busy with the usual afternoon traffic. Cowboys from surrounding ranches mingled with farmers, prospectors, and businessmen. Several people nodded to Quincy as he passed, their eyes curious as they noted his companion. News would spread quickly in a town this size, he knew. By tomorrow, everyone would know about his impulsive proposal. The boarding house was a neat two-story building with a wide porch where several chairs sat empty in the heat. Mrs. Patterson, the proprietor, greeted them at the door with her usual efficiency. "Mr. Carson, what a pleasant surprise. And Miss Kelley, is it not? I was so sorry to hear about your father." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson," Thea said quietly. "We are looking for Reverend Michaels," Quincy explained. "Is he available?" "He is in the parlor reading. Let me fetch him for you, Mrs." Patterson disappeared inside, leaving them waiting in the small entrance hall. Quincy set down the crate and turned to Thea. "Are you all right? I know this has been a strange day for you." She gave him a wan smile. "Strange barely begins to describe it. This morning, I was wondering if I should just abandon the homestead and try to find work as a seamstress or schoolteacher somewhere. Now, I am about to speak with a preacher about marrying a man I met less than an hour ago." "We could still slow this down if you want," Quincy offered, though he found himself hoping she would not take him up on it. Something about Thea Kelley called to him in a way he could not quite explain. "No," she said firmly. "You were right when you said practical considerations outweigh romantic notions out here. I cannot make it on my own, not really. I could probably survive for a while, but survival is not the same as living. What you have offered me is a chance at a real life." Before Quincy could respond, Reverend Michaels appeared with Mrs. Patterson. He was a tall, lean man in his mid-50s with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. "Quincy Carson," he said warmly, extending his hand. "I have not seen you in town for several weeks. And Miss Kelley, my condolences on your recent loss. Your father was a good man." "Thank you, Reverend," Thea said. "What can I do for you both?" Quincy took a breath. "We would like you to perform a marriage ceremony for us, Reverend, as soon as possible." The preacher's eyebrows rose. "I see. And how long have you two been courting?" "We met about an hour ago," Quincy admitted. Reverend Michaels exchanged a glance with Mrs. Patterson, who looked equally surprised. "That is rather sudden, is it not?" "It is," Quincy agreed. but we are both of age and of sound mind. I have a good ranch and need a wife. Miss Kelley needs security and a home. We have agreed to marry and make the best of it together." The Reverend studied them both carefully. "Miss Kelley, are you entering into this marriage of your own free will? No one is forcing you." "No one is forcing me," Thea confirmed. "Mr. Carson has made me a fair offer, and I have accepted it with full understanding of what it means." "And you are prepared to take wedding vows seriously, to honor them even when times are difficult?" "I am," Thea said without hesitation. "My father taught me that a promise made is a promise kept. I would not agree to this if I did not intend to see it through." Reverend Michaels nodded slowly. "Very well. I have performed enough weddings in my years to know that love is not always present at the start of a marriage. Sometimes it grows over time, nurtured by respect and commitment. If you are both willing to put in that effort, then I will marry you." "Thank you, Reverend," Quincy said, feeling relief wash over him. "When would you like the ceremony?" Quincy looked at Thea. 4 days from now," he suggested. "That will give you time to settle things at the homestead and get your dress made. We can get the marriage license tomorrow." 4 days, Thea repeated as if testing the words. "Yes, that seems right." "Very well," Reverend Michaels said. "Shall we say Saturday morning at 10 o'clock? We can hold the ceremony in the church. Will you have any family or friends attending?" Thea shook her head. "My father was my only family. I have a few acquaintances in town, but no one close." "I have some ranch hands who have been with me for years," Quincy said. "I would like them to be there. And Mueller from the Mercantile, if he is willing." "I am sure we can arrange that," the Reverend said. "Now, there is the matter of my fee. The standard is $5 for a marriage ceremony." Quincy pulled out his billfold again, but Thea suddenly spoke up. "Reverend, would you accept a trade instead of cash? I have some fine embroidery work at home, tablecloths and pillowcases that my mother made. They are quite beautiful and I have no use for them all." The preacher smiled. "My wife would love such things." "Yes, I would be happy to accept them as payment." "Then it is settled," Quincy said. "We will see you Saturday morning at 10. As they left the boarding house, Quincy felt the reality of what he had just set in motion beginning to sink in. In 4 days, he would be a married man. His solitary life at the ranch would be forever changed. The thought should have terrified him, but instead he felt a curious sense of anticipation. "I should get you home," he said to Thea. "It is a long walk back to the Brennan place, and the day is getting warm." "I have my father's old horse and cart," Thea said. "I left them at the livery." They walked to the stable, where a patient old bay mare waited in a stall. The cart was weathered but serviceable, and Quincy helped Thea load the crate of supplies onto it. "I will come by tomorrow morning with my wagon," Quincy said. "We can go get the marriage license, and then I will help you start packing up your father's belongings. The tools and anything else you want to keep can come to the ranch." Thea climbed onto the cart seat and gathered the reins. In the afternoon light, she looked very young and very tired. "Quincy, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really do this? There must be plenty of women who would be happy to marry a successful rancher. Why make such an offer to a complete stranger?" Quincy was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. "I have been alone for a long time," he finally said. "At first it was by necessity, building up the ranch and just trying to survive. Then it became habit. I stopped going to town socials and church gatherings. I told myself I was too busy, but the truth is I got comfortable with loneliness. It became easier than risking connection." He paused, meeting her eyes. "When I saw you in the Mercantile, crying because you were trying so hard to be strong, something in me recognized something in you. We are both people who have learned to survive on our own, maybe too well. I thought perhaps we could learn to do more than just survive. Together." Thea's eyes glistened with fresh tears, but she blinked them back. That is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time. I promised you honesty, Quincy said simply. She nodded and clicked to the horse, setting the cart in motion. Quincy watched her until she turned onto the eastern road and disappeared from view. Then he went to retrieve his own horse from where he had left it hitched outside the Mercantile. The ride back to his ranch gave him time to think. His foreman, Diego Martinez, would be surprised by the news. Diego had worked for Quincy's father before Quincy was even born, and he had stayed on after the elder Carson's death to help the young man keep the ranch going. He was like family, and Quincy valued his opinion. The ranch came into view as Quincy crested a small rise. The house was a solid structure of adobe and wood, built by his father with an eye toward expansion. It had 6 rooms, which had seemed excessive when Quincy was growing up as an only child, but now he was grateful for the space. There was a main bedroom, 2 smaller bedrooms, a kitchen with a good iron stove, a parlor, and a room his mother had used for sewing that had become Quincy's office. The house needed a woman's touch, he could admit that. It was clean but Spartan, functional but not really a home. Diego was working with one of the young horses in the corral when Quincy arrived. He was a compact man in his early 60s with silver threading through his black hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the Arizona sun. "You are back early," Diego called out. "I thought you would be in town most of the day." Quincy dismounted and led his horse to the barn. "I have some news that you might find interesting." Diego secured the young horse and joined Quincy, curiosity evident in his expression. "What kind of news?" "I am getting married on Saturday." Diego stopped dead in his tracks. "You are what?" "Getting married." "To a woman named Thea Kelley." "Her father died recently and she was in a difficult situation. I offered to marry her and she accepted." "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," Diego muttered, crossing himself. "Have you lost your mind? You do not even know this woman." "I know enough," Quincy said, beginning to unsaddle his horse. "She is honest, hardworking, and in need of help. I need a wife. It makes practical sense." "Practical sense," Diego repeated incredulously. "Marriage should be about more than practical sense, Quincy. What about love, companionship? What if you cannot stand each other after a month?" "Then we will work through it like adults," Quincy said calmly. "Diego, I know this seems sudden. It is sudden, but I have been alone out here for 8 years and I am tired of it. I want someone to share meals with, to talk to in the evenings. I want to build something with someone. Thea needs those same things. We are starting from a place of mutual need and respect. That is more than a lot of marriages have." Diego shook his head but seemed to accept that Quincy had made up his mind. "When do I get to meet this woman who has made you lose your senses?" "Probably not until the wedding. She is busy settling her father's affairs. But you will like her, Diego. She has strength in her." "She will need it, married to a stubborn man like you," Diego grumbled, but there was affection in his voice. "I suppose congratulations are in order, even if I think you are crazy." "Thank you," Quincy said. "Now, I need to get the house ready for a woman to live in. The spare bedroom needs to be cleaned out and made into a proper room. She might want to use it for sewing or some such." "You mean your mother's old room? It is full of your father's papers and ranch records. Then I will move them to my office, and the bedroom needs fresh linens and curtains. Do we have any curtains?" Diego laughed outright at that. "No, Quincy, we do not have curtains. We are bachelor ranchers, not society ladies. You will need to buy such things in town, or wait and let your new wife choose them herself." "Right," Quincy said, feeling slightly overwhelmed. "There is so much I have not thought about." "That is because you have known this woman for all of a few hours," Diego pointed out. "But do not worry. Women have a way of making a house into a home. You just need to give her the freedom to do it. That evening, Quincy sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and tried to imagine what his life would look like in a week. There would be someone else in this house, someone with her own thoughts and feelings and needs. Someone who would expect things from him, even if she had said she would not pressure him. The responsibility of it felt heavy, but not unpleasant. He thought about Thea's face, the way she had looked so lost in the Mercantile and then so determined when she made her decision. She had courage, he could see that. It took courage to accept a proposal from a stranger, to trust that he would keep his word. He was determined not to let her down. The next morning, Quincy was up before dawn. He hitched up his wagon and loaded it with empty crates for packing, then set out for the Brennan place as the sun was just beginning to paint the sky pink and gold. The drought had left the landscape looking tired, but there was a stark beauty to it nonetheless. He loved this country, harsh as it could be. The Brennan homestead appeared much as he remembered it from the few times he had passed by. The house was smaller than his, just 3 rooms from the look of it, but it was well maintained. Someone had put effort into building a garden, though the drought had taken its toll on the plants. There was a small barn and a corral that had seen better days. Thea emerged from the house as he pulled up, and Quincy was struck by how different she looked in the morning light. She had changed into a work dress of faded brown calico, and her hair was braided and pinned up sensibly. She looked more settled than she had yesterday, as if a good night's sleep and some time to process had helped her come to terms with her decision. "Good morning," she called out. "You are early." "Rancher's habit," Quincy said, climbing down from the wagon. "We can head to town for the license whenever you are ready. Let me just lock up the house. I have already fed the chickens and collected the eggs." She disappeared back inside and emerged a moment later with a basket covered with a cloth. "I brought some eggs for you and some bread I baked yesterday. Consider it the start of my contributions to the household." Quincy accepted the basket, touched by the gesture. "You did not have to do that." "I wanted to," she said simply. "You have been very generous to me. It seems only right to begin as I mean to go on." The drive to town took about an hour, and at first they rode in silence. But gradually, Thea began to ask questions about the ranch, and Quincy found himself talking more than he usually did, describing his operation and his plans for the future. "I started with just 50 head of cattle when my parents died," he explained. "The ranch was in debt, and I had to work hard to build it back up. But I had some luck with horse breeding. There is a good market for well-trained horses, both for ranch work and for the army. I have been able to grow the herd and pay off the debts, and now the place turns a decent profit." "You must be very proud of what you have accomplished," Thea said. "I suppose I am," Quincy admitted. "Though it has been lonely at times. Diego is good company, but he has his own life. He has a daughter in Tucson that he visits when he can." "What will he think of you bringing home a wife so suddenly?" "He thinks I am crazy," Quincy said with a slight smile. "But he is loyal, and he will give you a fair chance. He loved my mother and has always said the ranch needs a woman's presence to be a true home." "I will try not to disappoint him," Thea said quietly. "You will not," Quincy said with certainty. "I can already tell you are a hard worker, and Diego respects that above all else." At the courthouse, a weathered building that also served as the territorial clerk's office, they waited in line behind 2 other couples seeking marriage licenses. The clerk was a bored-looking man named Harrison who barely glanced at them as he pulled out the necessary forms. "Names?" he asked, pen poised. "Quincy James Carson and Thea Marie Kelley," Quincy supplied. Harrison wrote this down, then asked a series of standard questions. Ages, current residences, occupations. whether either had been married before. He filled out the form with practiced efficiency, had them both sign, collected the $3 fee, and handed Quincy the license. "Congratulations," he said without enthusiasm. "Get this signed by a recognized minister or justice of the peace and return it within 30 days to make it official." As they left the courthouse, Thea let out a breath. "Well, that is done. It feels more real now somehow." "Are you having second thoughts?" Quincy asked. She shook her head. "No, just trying to adjust to how quickly my life is changing. 4 days ago, my biggest worry was whether the chickens would keep laying through the heat. Now I am about to become a rancher's wife." "You can still be yourself," Quincy said. "I am not expecting you to become someone different. The chickens can come to the ranch if you want to keep tending them." This made Thea smile, and Quincy realized it was the first genuine smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, making her look younger and less burdened. They spent the rest of the morning and early afternoon at the Brennan place, sorting through her father's belongings. It was hard work, both physically and emotionally. Thea held herself together well, but Quincy could see her struggling when she came across particularly meaningful items. Her father's favorite pipe, a photograph of her mother, a Bible with family records written in the front. "Keep anything that has meaning to you," Quincy told her. "We have room at the ranch for your family's things." "You are being very patient with me," Thea said, carefully wrapping the photograph in cloth. "Most men would not understand why I am having such trouble letting go of these old things." "They are not just old things," Quincy said. "They are connections to the people you loved. That matters." By late afternoon, they had loaded the wagon with everything Thea wanted to keep. Her father's tools, some furniture including a beautiful oak dresser that had been her mother's, boxes of dishes and linens, her sewing supplies, and various personal items. The chickens were crated and added to the load, clucking indignantly at the disruption. "I will need to come back one more time before the wedding," Thea said, looking at the now mostly empty house, "to do a final cleaning and collect the last few things." "I can bring you back tomorrow if you like," Quincy offered, "or Friday morning. Friday would be better. That will give me tomorrow and the next day to get settled at the ranch and finish making my dress." "About that," Quincy said, "I probably should have mentioned this before, but you will have your own bedroom at the ranch. My mother's old sewing room. I will move my papers out of it so you can use it however you like. I want you to feel comfortable, and I meant what I said about not pressuring you. We can take things slow." Thea's expression was hard to read. "That is very considerate of you. Most men would not be so understanding." "I figure we have a whole lifetime ahead of us," Quincy said. "No need to rush the personal side of things until we are both ready." The ride back to the ranch was slower due to the heavy load. The sun was setting by the time they arrived, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Diego came out to meet them, and Quincy made the introductions. "Diego Martinez, this is my fiancé, Thea Kelley." "Thea, Diego has been with my family for over 40 years. He is the best horseman in the territory and knows more about ranching than I ever will." Diego removed his hat and gave a courteous bow. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Kelley. Welcome to the Carson Ranch." "Thank you, Mr. Martinez," Thea said. "I hope I will not be too much of a disruption to your routine. Please call me Diego, and any disruption you cause will be a welcome one. This place has been too quiet for too long." He glanced at the loaded wagon. "Looks like you brought half a household with you." "Just the important things," Thea said. "I hope there is room for it all." "Plenty of room," Diego assured her. "Let me help you unload." The three of them worked together to carry everything inside. Quincy showed Thea through the house, and he tried to see it through her eyes. The solid but plain furniture, the bare walls that could use some decoration, the kitchen that was functional but lacked any homey touches. "It is a good house," Thea said diplomatically. "It has strong bones. It just needs some warmth added to it." "That is what Diego said you would do," Quincy replied. "Make it into a home." "I will try my best," Thea promised. They set up the sewing room for Thea's immediate use, moving Quincy's papers and ranch records to his office. Her mother's dresser fit perfectly against one wall, and they made up a bed with fresh linens that Diego had dug out of a storage chest. "I will leave you to get settled," Quincy said once everything was in place. "Supper will be ready in about an hour. Nothing fancy, just beef and beans and bread." "I am not much of a cook. I can cook," Thea said. "Starting tomorrow, I will take over the kitchen if you like." "I would like that very much," Quincy admitted. Though Diego usually cooks for the ranch hands, there are two others besides him, Jack and Peter. They have a cabin near the barn. Good men, both of them. They know you are coming and they have instructions to be respectful. "I appreciate that," Thea said. "I will do my best to be a good addition to the ranch." After Quincy left, Thea sat on her new bed and looked around the room that would be hers. It was strange to think that just yesterday morning she had woken in her father's house, certain she was facing destitution, and now she was in a comfortable room in a prosperous ranch house, engaged to be married to a man who seemed genuinely kind. She had been honest with Quincy when she said she had no regrets about her decision, but that did not mean she was not terrified. What if she could not live up to his expectations? What if she proved to be a disappointment as a wife? What if they discovered they were fundamentally incompatible? But then she remembered the way he had looked at her in the Mercantile, with such unexpected compassion. The way he had offered her dignity instead of charity. The way he had been patient with her grief as they sorted through her father's belongings. Those things suggested a man of character, a man worth taking a chance on. Thea stood and began unpacking her few dresses, hanging them in the small wardrobe. Tomorrow she would start working on her wedding dress. The blue calico Mueller had given her was lovely, and she had enough white lace to make a nice collar and cuffs. It would not be fancy, but it would be respectable and new, and that felt important somehow. She wanted to come to Quincy as a bride, not a charity case. That evening at supper, Thea met the ranch hands. Jack was a young man of about 25 with red hair and an easy smile. Peter was older, perhaps 40, quiet and serious but with kind eyes. Both men were clearly surprised by Quincy's sudden engagement but polite enough not to show it too obviously. "Miss Kelley, if you need anything built or fixed, you just let me know," Jack offered. "I am pretty handy with tools." "Thank you, Jack, I may take you up on that." Diego had made a simple but hearty meal, and Thea was surprised to find she had an appetite for the first time in weeks. The food was good, and the conversation flowed easily, mostly talk of ranch business and horses. She listened more than she spoke, trying to get a sense of how this household operated. After supper, Quincy walked her back to the house while the men cleaned up. The night air was cool and pleasant after the heat of the day, and the sky was full of stars. "Are you going to be all right here tonight?" Quincy asked. "I know it is all new and strange." "I will be fine," Thea assured him. "It is a good deal more comfortable than what I have been facing on my own. Still, if you need anything, my room is just down the hall. Do not hesitate to wake me if something is wrong." "I appreciate that, Quincy. You have been very kind to me." He looked like he wanted to say something more but just nodded instead. "Good night, Thea. Sleep well." "Good night." Thea lay awake for a long time that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The wind rustled through the cottonwood trees near the house. A horse whinnied softly in the barn. They were peaceful sounds, and eventually they lulled her to sleep. The next morning, Thea woke early and dressed quickly. She found Quincy already in the kitchen, trying to start a fire in the stove for coffee. "Let me do that," she said. "You are making more smoke than heat." Quincy stepped back with a rueful smile. "I admit, I am better with cattle than cook stoves." Thea had the fire going properly within minutes, and soon had coffee brewing and bacon sizzling in a pan. She found eggs in the cold box, and made scrambled eggs with some dried peppers she discovered in the pantry. It felt good to cook in a real kitchen again, with a proper stove and plenty of supplies. Diego and the ranch hands appeared when they smelled breakfast cooking, and Thea found herself feeding 5 hungry men instead of just one. It was surprisingly enjoyable. They were appreciative of the food and generous with their compliments. "Miss Kelley, this is the best breakfast we have had in months," Peter said sincerely. "Diego does his best, but he is better with dinner than morning cooking." "It is true," Diego agreed without offense. "I have never mastered eggs. They always come out rubbery." After breakfast, Thea cleaned the kitchen and then settled down with her sewing. The blue calico was spread across the table, and she carefully measured and cut the pieces for her dress. It had been a long time since she had made something for herself, and she found the work soothing. Quincy came in around mid-morning to check on her. "How is it going?" "Well, I think. The fabric is good quality and I have enough for a nice dress. It should be finished by Friday night if I work steadily." "Do not work yourself too hard," Quincy cautioned. "There is no rush." "There is a bit of a rush," Thea said with a small smile. "I am getting married on Saturday, in case you forgot." "Not likely to forget that," Quincy said. "I have thought of little else since yesterday morning." His honesty surprised her. "Have you had any regrets?" "None," he said firmly. "You?" "None," she echoed, and realized it was true. Despite the strangeness of the situation, she felt more hopeful than she had in months. The next 2 days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Thea spent most of her time sewing, but she also began to add small touches to the house. Arranging wildflowers in a jar on the kitchen table, hanging some embroidered towels her mother had made, setting out a few of her father's books on a shelf in the parlor. The house began to feel more like a home. Quincy was gone much of each day working on the ranch, but he made a point of coming back for meals and spending time in the evenings talking with Thea. They discussed everything from their childhoods to their opinions on politics to their favorite foods. Thea found that Quincy was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that emerged once he relaxed. On Friday morning, as promised, Quincy took Thea back to the Brennan place for one final visit. She cleaned the house thoroughly, wanting to leave it in good condition for whoever might claim it next. She collected the last few items she wanted to keep. Some jars of preserves she had made earlier in the summer, her father's old hat, a quilt her grandmother had stitched. As they prepared to leave, Thea took one last walk around the property. This had been her home for 5 years, the place where she had nursed her father through his final illness, the place where she had learned what it meant to work hard and persevere. It was bittersweet to leave it behind, but she was also ready to move forward. "Goodbye, Papa," she whispered, standing by the fresh grave behind the house. "I am going to be all right. You do not need to worry about me anymore." Quincy gave her time and space for her goodbye, waiting patiently by the wagon. When she finally returned, her eyes were red, but she held her head high. "I am ready," she said. That evening, Thea put the finishing touches on her wedding dress. The blue calico hung beautifully, and the white lace collar gave it an elegant touch. She tried it on and looked at herself in the small mirror over her dresser. She looked like a bride, she thought. Not the fairy tale kind from storybooks, but a real woman ready to start a new life. There was a knock on her door, and Diego's voice called out, "Miss Kelley, I have something for you." She opened the door to find the older man holding a small wooden box. "These were Quincy's mother's," he explained. "Her jewelry. Not much, just some simple pieces, but Quincy wanted you to have them for tomorrow. He thought you might like something borrowed or something old or whatever it is that brides are supposed to have." Thea opened the box to find a simple gold necklace, a pair of pearl earrings, and a lovely brooch shaped like a flower. "These are beautiful," she breathed. "Are you sure he wants me to have them?" he insisted, Diego said. "Maria Carson was a good woman and she would have liked you. She always said this ranch needed a family, not just men working the land. You are going to make Quincy happy, I think. He already seems lighter than he has in years." "I hope so," Thea said. "I will do my best to be a good wife to him." Diego smiled. "I have no doubt of that. Get some sleep, Miss Kelley. Tomorrow is a big day." That night, Thea lay in bed thinking about the next day. In the morning, she would become Mrs. Quincy Carson. It was strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. She found herself praying, asking God to help her be worthy of Quincy's trust, to help them build something good together. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Thea woke early and bathed carefully, washing her hair with the lavender soap she had been saving. She styled it as best she could, pulling it up in a soft arrangement with a few curls left loose to frame her face. She put on her new blue dress and fastened her mother's pearl earrings in her ears and the gold necklace around her throat. When she emerged from her room, she found Quincy waiting in the parlor. He had dressed in his best suit, a dark wool that brought out the blue in his eyes. His hair was neatly combed and he had obviously shaved carefully. He looked handsome and nervous. "You look beautiful," he said softly when he saw her. "Thank you," Thea said, feeling herself blush. "You look very handsome as well." Diego drove them to town in the wagon, which had been scrubbed clean and decorated with ribbons that Jack had insisted on tying to the sides. "Every bride needs a proper conveyance to her wedding," the young cowboy had declared. The small church in Springerville was simple but lovely, with whitewashed walls and plain wooden pews. Mueller was there waiting, along with his wife and a few other townspeople who had heard about the wedding and wanted to witness it. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house had brought some flowers, and they had been arranged near the altar. Reverend Michael stood at the front in his best robes, looking solemn and dignified. As Thea walked down the short aisle on Diego's arm, she found herself focusing on Quincy's face. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something between awe and tenderness. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they both lived. When Quincy slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Thea felt tears prick at her eyes. This was real. She was really getting married. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Michael said with a smile. Quincy leaned in slowly, giving Thea time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not want to. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a brief, sweet kiss that somehow felt exactly right. "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Quincy Carson," the Reverend announced, and the small gathering broke into applause. Afterward, there was a small celebration at the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson had prepared a wedding cake, and Mueller had contributed bottles of apple cider. It was modest but heartfelt, and Thea found herself genuinely touched by the kindness of these people who barely knew her. "You have good friends," she told Quincy as they shared a piece of cake. "They are becoming your friends too," he replied. "You are part of this community now." As the afternoon wore on and the celebration wound down, Thea found herself growing nervous. Tonight would be her first night as a married woman. She and Quincy had not discussed the specifics of their sleeping arrangements beyond his earlier promise not to pressure her. But surely as his wife, there would be certain expectations. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them seeming lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, the ranch hands congratulated them warmly and then made themselves scarce, sensing the newlyweds might want privacy. Inside the house, Quincy turned to Thea. "I know this is all new and probably a bit overwhelming. I want you to know that nothing has to change tonight just because we are married. You can sleep in your room and I will sleep in mine. We can take our time figuring out how this works between us." Thea felt a rush of gratitude for his consideration, but also a surprising sense of disappointment. She had been so focused on her nervousness that she had not realized part of her was hoping for something more. "That is very kind of you," she said carefully. "But Quincy, we are married now, truly married. And while I appreciate you wanting to go slowly, I also do not want to start our life together with unnecessary distance between us." Quincy looked surprised. "What are you saying?" Thea took a breath, gathering her courage. "I am saying that I would like to try to be a real wife to you. Not tonight necessarily, but soon. I want us to build a true marriage, not just a practical arrangement." Something warm kindled in Quincy's eyes. "I want that too," he admitted. "I have wanted it since the moment I first saw you, but I did not want to push you into anything you were not ready for." "Then we will figure it out together," Thea said. "As we go. Is that all right?" "More than all right," Quincy said. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band he had placed there that morning. "Thea, I know this started as a practical arrangement, but I want you to know that I am already beginning to care for you, more than I expected to so quickly." "I feel the same," Thea whispered. "It is strange and a little frightening, but also wonderful." Quincy drew her closer, and they stood there in the fading evening light, holding each other. It was not passionate or dramatic, just two people finding comfort in each other's presence. But it felt like the beginning of something real and good. That night, after some discussion, they decided that Thea would stay in her own room for now, but that Quincy would come kiss her goodnight. It was a small thing, but it felt significant, a bridge between the separate lives they had lived and the shared life they were building. When Quincy appeared at her door that night, Thea was already in her nightgown with her hair braided for sleep. He had changed into a simple shirt and trousers, his feet bare on the wooden floor. "Good night, Mrs. Carson," he said softly and kissed her gently. "Good night, husband," she replied, and watched him walk back to his own room. She lay awake for a while, her fingers touching her lips where he had kissed her, marveling at how much her life had changed in just 1 week. The days that followed fell into a pleasant routine. Thea took over the management of the household, cooking meals and keeping the house clean. But she also began to venture outside, curious about the ranch operations. Quincy was happy to show her around, teaching her about the cattle and horses. "This is Starlight," he said one morning, introducing her to a beautiful gray mare. "She is my best breeding mare, produces strong, intelligent foals every year." Thea reached out tentatively to stroke the horse's nose. "She is lovely. I never learned much about horses. My father had just the one old mare for the cart. Would you like to learn to ride?" Quincy asked. "Not Starlight, she is too spirited for a beginner, but I have a gentle gelding that would be perfect for you." "I would like that," Thea said. "I want to be able to go places on my own, not always dependent on the wagon." Over the next few weeks, Quincy taught Thea to ride. She proved to be a quick learner, though she had a few tumbles that left her bruised but laughing. Quincy was patient and encouraging, and she found herself looking forward to their daily lessons. As autumn deepened and the weather cooled, Thea and Quincy grew closer. Their goodnight kisses became longer and more lingering. They began spending evenings sitting together in the parlor, Thea doing mending while Quincy read aloud from books or newspapers. Sometimes they just talked, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for the future. "I always wanted children," Thea admitted one evening. "A whole house full of them. My father used to tease me that I would need a bigger house." "We could add on to this one," Quincy said. "There is plenty of land and the structure is sound. We could build a whole wing if we wanted." "Do you want children?" Thea asked. "I do," Quincy said. "I always pictured having a family. It was one of the reasons I finally decided I needed to marry. This ranch needs more than just cowboys to carry it forward." About 6 weeks after their wedding, on a cool October evening, things between them finally shifted. They had finished dinner and were sitting by the fire in the parlor. Quincy had been reading, but he set his book aside and looked at Thea with an intensity that made her heart race. "Thea, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here?" "With me? Very happy," she said honestly. "Happier than I imagined I could be." "I am glad," Quincy said. "Because I find myself falling in love with you, and I hope that is not unwelcome news." Thea set down her sewing and moved to sit beside him on the sofa. "It is not unwelcome at all. I have been falling in love with you too." Quincy cupped her face in his hands. "May I kiss you properly?" "Yes," she breathed. This kiss was different from the gentle pecks they had been exchanging. It was deep and searching, full of weeks of restrained desire. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Thea," Quincy said roughly, "I want you to be my wife in every way." "But only if you want that too." "I do want that," Thea said. "I want to be truly yours." Quincy stood and extended his hand to her. "Then come with me." He led her to his bedroom, which Thea had never entered before. It was a simple room with a large bed and sturdy furniture. But what she noticed most was the way Quincy looked at her, with tenderness and desire mingled together. What followed was awkward and tender and ultimately beautiful. They were both nervous, fumbling a bit as they learned each other. But there was laughter too, and whispered words of affection, and a sense of rightness that made up for any technical imperfection. Afterward, lying in Quincy's arms, Thea felt a sense of completion she had not known she was missing. This was what marriage was supposed to be, she thought. Not just legal papers and shared space, but true intimacy and partnership. "I love you," Quincy murmured into her hair. "I love you too," Thea replied, and knew it was absolutely true. From that night on, they shared a bedroom. Thea moved her belongings into Quincy's room, and her former room became the sewing room once more. The house felt more complete somehow, as if it had been waiting for this. As winter approached, Thea discovered she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses and was feeling queasy in the mornings. The realization filled her with joy and a touch of nervousness. She told Quincy one evening over dinner, setting down her fork and looking at him seriously. "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" he asked, immediately attentive. "I am fairly certain I am carrying your child." For a moment, Quincy just stared at her. Then his face split into the widest smile she had ever seen on him. He was around the table in an instant, pulling her up into his arms. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Thea laughed, happy tears streaming down her face. "I think it will be born sometime in late spring or early summer." Quincy kissed her thoroughly, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your papa, and I already love you so much." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Thea suffered some morning sickness in the first few months, but Quincy was attentive and supportive. He insisted she rest more, and he became almost comically protective. "I am having a baby, not dying," Thea protested when he tried to prevent her from lifting a laundry basket. I know, but I do not want you to overdo it, Quincy said stubbornly. Diego and the ranch hands were thrilled by the news of the coming baby. They all became protective of Thea in their own ways. Jack built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving it with designs of horses and cattle. Peter fashioned a set of tiny horseshoes from scraps of iron, declaring them lucky charms for the baby. Diego knitted a set of tiny booties, a skill he had apparently learned from his late wife. As her belly grew through the winter months, Thea felt increasingly connected to the ranch and the life she and Quincy were building. She had started teaching Diego and the ranch hands to read in the evenings, and they were proving to be eager students. She had also begun corresponding with a few women in town, forming friendships that enriched her life. Spring arrived with a burst of green after good winter rains ended the drought. The ranch was thriving, and so was Thea. She was large and uncomfortable by late April, eager to meet the child she carried. I feel like I am carrying a very active calf, she complained one evening as the baby kicked vigorously against her ribs. Quincy laughed and placed his hand on her stomach, feeling the movement. Strong like his mother, or her mother, Thea corrected. It could be a girl. Boy or girl, I will be happy, Quincy assured her, as long as you both come through healthy. The baby decided to make his appearance on a warm May morning. Thea's labor started just before dawn, and Quincy immediately sent Jack to fetch the midwife from town, a capable woman named Mrs. Schultz, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. Quincy stayed with Thea through the labor, holding her hand and wiping her face with cool cloths. She was grateful for his presence, even though he looked nearly as terrified as she felt. You are doing wonderfully, Mrs. Schultz encouraged. Not much longer now. After 8 hours of hard labor, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry that made everyone in the room laugh with relief. You have a healthy boy, Mrs. Schultz announced, placing the squalling infant on Thea's chest. Thea looked down at her son, overwhelmed with love and awe. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair like Quincy's and a determined expression even as a newborn. Hello, little one, she whispered. I am your mama. Quincy was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his wife and child. He is perfect. Thea, you are amazing. Thank you for giving me this gift. We made him together, Thea said. What should we name him? They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Quincy said, What about James, after my father, James Carson? James Carson, Thea repeated. It is a good, strong name. I like it. The baby, Jamie as they quickly began calling him, thrived. He was a healthy, happy infant who seemed to bring joy to everyone on the ranch. Diego took to his role as honorary grandfather with enthusiasm, and Jack and Peter competed for the privilege of making the baby smile. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and noisier, but also more fulfilled. Thea adjusted to motherhood with the same practical determination she brought to everything else. Quincy proved to be a devoted father, happy to walk the floor with a fussy baby or change messy diapers without complaint. As Jamie grew through his first year, the love between Quincy and Thea continued to deepen. They had built something real and lasting from their improbable beginning, creating not just a marriage but a true partnership grounded in respect and affection. On their first wedding anniversary, Quincy gave Thea a beautiful silver locket. Open it, he urged. Inside was a tiny portrait he had commissioned of Jamie on one side and a lock of the baby's dark hair on the other. It is beautiful, Thea breathed. Quincy, you did not have to do this. I wanted to, he said. I wanted you to have something that shows how much you and Jamie mean to me. This year has been the happiest of my life, Thea. You took a chance on me when I was just a lonely rancher making a wild proposal in a mercantile. You have given me everything I did not even know I needed. You saved me too, Thea said. When I was at my lowest point, you offered me hope and a future. I would have taken your offer even if I had not come to love you, but I am so grateful that love found us anyway. They kissed, their son sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, and Thea thought about how far they had come from that day in Mueller's store. She had been crying, desperate, and at the end of her resources. Quincy had been lonely, isolated, and yearning for connection. Together, they had built something neither could have created alone. The years that followed brought more children. 2 years after Jamie, they had a daughter they named Rose for her rosy complexion and sweet disposition. 3 years after that came twin boys, Thomas and Timothy, who kept them all on their toes with their mischievous energy. The house they had thought was too big for 2 people became comfortably full of family. The ranch continued to prosper. Quincy and Thea worked as true partners, with Thea taking over much of the business side of things since she had a better head for figures. They expanded their operations, buying additional land and increasing their herds. The Carson Ranch became known throughout the territory for quality horses and cattle. Diego remained with them until his death at age 73, a beloved member of the family who taught all the Carson children to ride and work with animals. Jack eventually married a girl from town and built his own small spread on land Quincy sold him at a generous price. Peter stayed on as foreman, loyal and steady as always. Mueller retired and sold his Mercantile, but he always made a point of reminding anyone who would listen that he had been present at the start of the Carson love story. "Saw the whole thing," he would say. "Most romantic proposal I ever witnessed, and I have seen plenty in my day." As the children grew, Thea sometimes told them the story of how she and their father met. The older ones were incredulous that their parents had married as virtual strangers. "How could you marry someone you did not know?" Rose asked when she was about 10 years old. "Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith," Thea explained. "Your father offered me kindness when I desperately needed it. He saw me at my worst moment and chose to help rather than look away. That told me everything I needed to know about his character. And Mama gave me a chance when she had every reason to be suspicious," Quincy added. "She trusted that I would keep my word, and I like to think I have done that." "You definitely have," Thea said, reaching across the dinner table to squeeze his hand. By the time Quincy and Thea reached their 20th wedding anniversary, Arizona had achieved statehood, and the wild frontier they had known was becoming more settled and civilized. Springerville had grown from a rough frontier town into a proper community with schools, churches, and even a small opera house. The Carson children were growing into fine young people. Jamie, at 19, was preparing to take over more ranch responsibilities. Rose, at 17, was being courted by a young lawyer in town. The twins, at 14, were still causing trouble but showing promise as horsemen. Quincy and Thea sat on their porch one evening, watching the sun set over land they had worked together for 2 decades. They had both aged, with silver threading through their hair and lines marking their faces, but they were still strong, still vital, still deeply in love. "You ever regret it?" Quincy asked. "Saying yes to a stranger in a mercantile," Thea laughed. "Not once. Not in 20 years, not for a single moment. Do you regret asking?" "Never," Quincy said firmly. "It was the best decision I ever made, though I will admit I did not really know what I was doing at the time." "Neither of us did," Thea agreed. "But we figured it out together, and that made all the difference." As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Arizona sky, they remained on the porch, sitting close together the way they had for 20 years. The sounds of their children laughing inside the house drifted out to them, along with the familiar noises of the ranch settling for the night. It had started with tears in a Mercantile and an impulsive proposal from a lonely man to a desperate woman. It had grown into a love story that spanned decades, producing children and grandchildren, and creating a legacy that would extend far beyond their own lifetimes. Quincy and Thea lived to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and even 2 great-grandchildren. The celebration was held at the ranch, which by then covered over 1,000 acres and was one of the most successful operations in the state. In their golden years, they often sat together in the evenings, remembering. They talked about that first meeting, about the early days of uncertainty and awkwardness, about the moment they realized friendship had become love. They talked about the children they had raised and the life they had built from nothing but determination and hope. When Quincy passed away at the age of 84, he died in his sleep with Thea holding his hand, just as she had held it on their wedding day 53 years earlier. Thea followed him 3 years later, surrounded by her family, at peace and content with the life she had lived. The ranch remained in the Carson family for generations, passed down through Jamie and his children and their children. The story of how it all began, with a woman crying in a Mercantile and a lonely rancher's bold proposal, became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. It was a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances, from choosing hope over despair, from seeing the potential in others, even when circumstances are difficult. Quincy and Thea had started with almost nothing, no love, little money, and few prospects. But they had built everything that mattered through commitment, respect, and the willingness to open their hearts to each other. Their love story was not the fairy tale kind with instant passion and dramatic declarations. It was quieter than that, more practical, grounded in the realities of frontier life. But it was no less real or profound. In its own way, it was even more romantic, because it showed that true love can grow from the smallest seeds when tended with care and patience. The little cemetery on the hill behind the ranch held their graves side by side, just as they had lain side by side for over 50 years of marriage. The headstones were simple, but well maintained by generations of descendants who honored their memory. Quincy James Carson, beloved husband, father, grandfather. Born 1851, died 1935. Thea Marie Carson, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. Born 1860, died 1938, together forever, and they were together in memory and legacy in the lives they had touched and the family they had created. From a moment of crisis and a bold proposal had come a lifetime of love, proving that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most extraordinary stories. The ranch still stood as of this writing, over a century after that fateful day in Mueller's Mercantile. The current owners, 6th-generation Carsons, knew the story by heart. They knew how their great-great-great-grandparents had met, how they had married as strangers and grown into soulmates. They knew that the family they were part of had been built on courage and kindness, and the willingness to take a chance on love. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sunset painted the Arizona sky in brilliant colors, ranch residents swore they could feel the presence of Quincy and Thea, still watching over the land they loved, still together as they had promised to be all those years ago in a small church in Springerville. Their story, born from tears and loneliness, had become a testament to the power of compassion and commitment. It proved that love does not always come like lightning, sudden and dramatic. Sometimes it comes like dawn, slowly brightening until suddenly everything is illuminated. And that kind of love, built steadily over time, can last forever. From that day in the Mercantile to their final days together, Quincy and Thea Carson had shown what marriage could be when two people committed to building something bigger than themselves. They had taken a practical arrangement and transformed it into a profound partnership that enriched not just their own lives but the lives of everyone around them. It was a story worth remembering, worth telling, worth celebrating. A story that proved that even in the hardest of circumstances, in the wildest of frontiers, love could not just survive but thrive. All it took was two people willing to say yes to possibility, to trust in each other, and to build their future one day at a time. And so the story of the lonely rancher who saw a woman crying in the Mercantile, bought her supplies, and asked her to marry him became a beloved family treasure, passed down through generations as a reminder that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected moments, and that true love is not found but built, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day, until it stands stronger than any fortress and lasts longer than any lifetime. The end.